Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to sort of pick up on two themes that you've mentioned in your closing remarks. The first was you identified this topic before the release of ChatGPT. And obviously, the release of generative AI has profoundly shifted, the public's consciousness. Of course, AI precedes that, but the public's consciousness of it and the potential of AI to transform our societies. And I remember when you first sort of identified this as a topic you wanted to work on, you explained to me why, in your mind, this was such an important issue, and it would become an even more important issue. So I want to sort of highlight the foresight that you had in writing a book, or starting to write a book, that has only become more relevant. And as you mentioned, its 4th edition in Spanish. I think it's because it's hit on something absolutely timely. The other theme I want to pick up on is the theme of aesthetics, and I want to turn to Noel in a moment. When shortly after you finished your fellowship, you invited me to come and meet other Latin American heads of state in a retreat in Ecuador. And we were in the middle of the Ecuadorian rainforest. And suddenly, President Duque pulls out a whole stream of DJ equipment and runs effectively transforms the campsite into a DJ sort of performance setting, a nightclub, effectively.
I can mix ideas and music as well,
yes.
so I try to do my best.
But it was remarkable how you used, in some sense, your musical talent to bring what was, a very diverse group of people together. And it speaks to your love of human beauty, love of the aesthetic value in human consciousness. And that's been a theme through many of the conversations in this book. And so, Noel, I thought if I could turn to you to just reflect on this, as you think about the theme and the thesis that President Duque has built in this book. What do you see as sort of the lessons that can be learned from your discipline, particularly English literature, and your time period, which is one that the president is so fond of, in the context of what it is we're dealing with AI today?
Even before you give the word to Noel, I have to say that I have so much respect for her that when we send the interviews back to the professors before the final publication, Noel sent so many red notes on the paper that I was a little bit worried. But she enriched the project with that literature precision that she has. Noel, thank you so much for being so important for this project, and thank you for trusting in strength and truth.
Hi.
It will be imminently.
This is the joy of the humanities, right? I can't use a mic. Anyway, thank you, President Duque. That's very kind. To get to your question, Karthik, and I think at the core of the book and what interests you is that question of aesthetics. I mean, it goes back to Plato, right? The issue of how we think about mimesis, how we think about what is the role of aesthetics. And Plato famously divided the search for knowledge from that which is mimetic as a counterfeit. But I think that one of the things we are also striving to do, and that literature has done continuously, and I go beyond the Western tradition in this, is to bridge that gap. The idea that literature stages or is a staging ground for testing out ideas, conflicting ideas, and for engendering conversation. I think that one of the things when you talk about is aesthetic education. And how, by reading and cultivating a sense of beauty or an appreciation for things that fall outside maybe our normal experience, or coming to understand things that discomfort us and that we may not particularly like, we can actually begin to occupy the position of others, right? To better understand where they're coming from. But I also think that what you're getting at is the ultimate distinction between how humans, it goes back to the word aesthesis, right? Sense perception. How humans perceive things versus how machines do. And that's a larger question that I shall have to leave to the philosophers and those thinking about it. But I do think that there is a sense that there is something so distinct about the way that rationality and the emotions marry up in an appreciation of what is aesthetic and what makes life worth living, right? That value that we accord to the superflux, as Shakespeare would say. You know, reason, not the need. It is the things that we cannot assign immediate, material, fungible value to that are often, and I think most often, if not always, the things we cherish the most in the world, because no value, no monetary value can be assigned to them. And I think that's something that your book comes back to, because I think a lot of what AI is currently driven by is money. And instead it needs to be driven by larger objectives about how it can better serve humanity instead of serving those who create it. So thank you for that timely intervention.
So Joe, somewhere in there was a cold call to the philosophers.
Sorry.
And I remember when the president came back from his tutorial with you, he came to my office and he said, wow. Those were his remarks. And you've had a profound influence, not just on President Duque, but on this community in thinking about, you know, what it means to be human and what it means to be good and right in the context of the polarized world in which we're living in. What were your reflections on this question that the president posed to you?
Before Joe begins, I also want to tell you an anecdote. Joe is one of the maybe world greatest experts on Marx, and his approach to study Marx is quite interesting. So we talked about Marx humanism and philosophy and whether he really thought about government and how to order society and things like that. But what was very interesting is that before we got to Marx, I saw so many books of Machiavelli in his bookshelf, and I said, Joe, my first book that was published in 2007, by the time Luciana was recently born, was called Machiavelli in Colombia. And I talked to him about Bernardo Machiavelli and Bartolomea de Nelli, Machiavelli's parents. And I said to Joe, you know, there's not evidence of what happened to Machiavelli's life before he was 28, different that his father was a notary and that he had a great library, but there's nothing that proves who were his tutors, his mentors, and so on. So I asked the question, do you think Machiavelli had a humanistic compass? And that's how the conversation began. And I must say, this has been one of the most inspiring conversations I've ever had on political philosophy. Professor.
Well, thank you so much. But if you ask me that question now, I think I'd say, what do you think? Which maybe is what I did on that occasion. So we talked in our conversation more about the connection between philosophy and public policy and public life, not so much about AI and machines, but you know, I have some reflections on this after the conversation, because if you take a humanistic perspective, so if you think perhaps there isn't a soul, there isn't anything particularly distinctive about human beings, in principle there doesn't seem to be a reason why there couldn't be some other entity that does what we do. So I think the question is really not, are we different from how machines will always be? You know, what's distinctive about human beings as opposed to other things? But really just, you know, what is distinctive about human beings? What is this intelligence? What are our values? And it doesn't matter so much whether a machine could also do that. I mean, I don't think at the moment any machine comes close. I think we haven't got that technology. But we're a lot way further now than anyone would have predicted 10 years ago. And so it may well be that we can create machines that have values and can reason like we do. I wouldn't rule that out. I'm not predicting it. And I'm scared of it as well. I think we're all scared of it. So we want to say why human beings are special, therefore nothing else could do what we could do. But I think the conversation we had was really about why philosophy is important in a policy school. And I give a sort of caricature of other policy schools. I'm sure it's not true. I say, if you go elsewhere, you'll be told you're doing science, or you're doing social science. You're not doing anything subjective or anything to do with values. You're looking at the evidence and coming up with answers based on the evidence. And you'll learn all about cost-benefit analysis. And so the thing I tell every student, and probably everyone who I can get to listen to me now, is that think about those words, cost and benefit. They're value terms. So someone has decided that something is going to count as a cost. Someone has decided what's going to count as a benefit. Do you want to be part of that conversation about what is a cost and what is a benefit? Or do you want to leave it to others to tell you? Because your choice isn't to do value-based or value-free work. It's to do value-based or value-ignoring work, or value-taking for granted work. And that's really what I wanted to get into this conversation. It's inescapable, but people pretend to escape it, and that is very bad. So I think that is the contribution I think I wanted to make in our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, Joe. Zoltan, you were one of the first interviews in this book, and the president was particularly keen that he speak to someone who understood how the brain worked, and he was searching for some sort of answer from your discipline in particular, neuroscience, to this question of what makes us human. As you reflect on the conversation you had with the president over the course of your tutorial, which of course was wide-ranging, what conclusions did you come to?
Again, before Sultan begins, I remember that because that was kind of funny. That day, it was a Monday, and I had been in London the previous day. My good friend Mauricio Caballero, that is here, had invited me to an Arsenal game, and that's how I was baptized as an Arsenal fan. So I came to that meeting with Sultan on a Monday, and Sultan, when he opened the door, like he looked at me, trying to see why was I in his office. And so he said, "Are you going to record?" And I said, "Yes." "Can I also record?" Yes, no problem. But I said, "You know, Sultan, this is a friendly conversation." And Sultan has that rigor of the professors that when you ask a question that is a little bit, a millimeter out of his field, he will say, "Well, that's not my particular field of knowledge," although he knows the answer, right? But I remember that in that conversation, Sultan, you told me that in your passion for tennis, you were about to publish a paper about a connection between tennis and the brain, because when someone is about to serve, all your neurons are giving specific instructions to your whole body on how to act and how to react. And I ask you something that I think is going to be a great part of your future research. Why do you think AI will never replace the human brain? I want you to share that with us today.
First of all, I was really impressed with your participation in the tutorial, and I think I learned more than probably you learned from my tutorial, and I was really honored and very happy to discuss things. So indeed, the sports example broke the ice between us, because I was initially, I don't give tutorials to presidents, usually, not yet, but maybe this will be a regular feature. And I think this tennis question broke the ice. And just, I want to tell you an anecdote, because I bumped into John Inverdale in a tennis match, a tennis commentator at Queen's Club, in a rain break. And we started talking about each other's professions. So I told John that I would really love to be a tennis commentator, not a neuroscientist. So he asked me, what do you do normally? And he said, I have to go back to Oxford and mark the exam papers now, because this was the season. And I told him that, guess what is the exam question this year for second year neuroscience is exactly this tennis question, that what is going through the brain of a tennis player when returning a serve. And then next day, John Inverdale with Peter Fleming, who was McEnroe's double partner, announced this question on BBC. So I had to go to Wellington Square and see the proctors, and I had to change the exam question. And so basically never tell the questions to any BBC sport commentator. But I think what was really stimulating for me when I discussed things with you, that I think you immediately grasped that all the higher cognitive functions come from our brain, which is 1,350 grams on average. It's like the size of a mango. You have millions of neurons with trillions of connectivity, and you shape your brain yourself. So your brain is actually the record of your life. All your experiences are embedded in your brain. And you can decide whether you become monolingual, bilingual, trilingual, or you play tennis or football or what other, or violin. It's up to you. But what was very interesting, that our discussions then moved into how do we get this hardware that is working. And I really appreciated a couple of your questions when I explained that all of our neurons were generated with us. We generated our neurons in utero, so all my cells are from Hungary in my brain, whereas I change my skin every week, gut, hair follicles, and these kind of things, they change all the time, but your brains are the same. And this is when you started asking about the diet and the influences during pregnancy. So you immediately grasp that this is the area where we should pay a little bit more attention, because then you don't get the hardware to function in society. So if you live in a society where you are judged and measured by your IQ and interactions, and if you don't have the hardware, you have a horrible disadvantage for the rest of your life. So fetal alcohol syndrome, drug abuse, these kind of things during pregnancy can have a devastating effect on somebody's life who didn't ask for it. And I remember we spent a bit of time on diet, Zika, and these. So for me, this tutorial was really changed my way how I think about developmental neurobiology. And right after your tutorial, I wrote an article to one of the developmental journals that the cost of not investing into developmental neuroscience, because these costs will be with us forever during our life. If you have Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease, these are horrible conditions, but it's only in the last 5-10 years of your life. But if you have a developmental abnormality, that's your life, your whole life. So I wrote that article because of your influence.
Thank you so much. I didn't know that, so I'm very happy now that you're sharing that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One of the things you were particularly keen on, Mr. President, as you were going through the tutorials, was to learn from the experience of other countries as they were grappling from this. And so you were particularly keen on reaching out to experts of other parts of the world. And it was in that context that we were able to have the pleasure and the honor of having both Tim Power and Eugene Rogan take tutorials with you. And Tim, so if I could turn to you next, and in particular to reflect on this question of humanism as it sort of colors the political environment and the political debate in Brazil today. And what lessons do you think that has, and the way the policy space there has taken these questions into consideration? What, yes.
No, I was going to add something, because
yes.
when I went to Tim's office,
yeah.
and Tim's office is quite particular, because you can tell it's almost like a Brazilian embassy here in Oxford. He has all this great memorabilia of his trips. And we talked about the contribution of Latin America and the contribution of Brazil to the conversations about humanism. So we had a conversation about the literary boom, Noel, and we talked about those great writers from Brazil that were so influential at the time. But we also talked about music, we talked about arts, and you said something very important. You said that the boom, more than a revolution of writers, was also a revolution of readers, that the whole world at that particular time was looking at Latin America, at the authors, and also the cultural movement. And I think, Tim, what inspired me a lot was that great optimism, but also that great place that you give to Latin America in its contribution to humanism. And I would love that you share also that with us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much. First of all, I want to say what a privilege it was to be included among these other 20 people that you... I don't think I deserve a place in your book, but I'm very grateful that you came to speak. I did want to say, just if I could just speak for a moment as head of the Social Sciences Division, you know, when I see an event like this, and I see what the school is doing to produce yourself and this book, it's just such a source of pride, you know, because you mentioned this university has had convening power, which in Spanish sounds much better, poder convocatorio. It sounds so much better in Spanish. And so we've had poder convocatorio since the 13th century. But I think that Blavatnik in the last 10 years has taken it to a completely different level. And you know, it's not just enough to have something like the Transformational Leaders Program. You also have to have people who want to be convened. And I think that describes yourself. So to come here and with authentic intellectual curiosity and do what you did is a very unique sort of, you asked, you know, what am I going to do in Oxford? What you decided to do is a really unique product. And this, you know, this will last for decades. So it's a deliverable, as we say in the horrible university technocracy. But it's something that will outlast all of us, and really grateful to that. So I did want to say just to the audience that when I met President Duque, it was such a pleasure because I recognized we have a lot in common, right? It's not just that we're both failed rock stars. We're both wannabe rockeros. We also love politicians, because I'm a political scientist, but I actually love to study politicians more than I like to study politics. And what I really appreciate about President Duque is that when he meets people around the world, he sizes them up, and he has a fantastic story about everybody. And he's also, you're also very comfortable with people who have different views from you, and that's a trait that I think is becoming very vanishing in the current world, as people willing to speak across the aisle. You know, you're comfortable with President Lula, and you're comfortable with your friend President Piñera, who I was with you the day that we lost President Piñera, which was a sad loss for all of us. But also the thing that really struck me is your love for Oxford and your love for the city and the university. It really comes through. And for those of us who are here every day, we work here, we're jobbing academics, I mean, it's really fantastic for us to have someone like yourself come here and remind us what an extraordinary and special place this is, you know. So, and I think I try to pinch myself every day when I go to work, because I grew up just like you, hearing people talk about Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and this magical place that we finally came to. So that's a long preamble, but I just wanted to say, I mean, this is just really, it's a delightful thing to see that you've done this book. And I was so glad that you concluded in with your epilogue about Malcolm Dees, because it's the kind of thing that Oxford does. We have people like Eugene, who has his connections to his countries, and Malcolm to Colombia, and Karthik to the rest of the world, every other 190 countries. But you know, the influence of Malcolm Dees on your country is so strong. And you know, a typical Oxford problem is that right now Ambassador Pete McKinley, who is the former ambassador to your country, is speaking at the Latin American Center right now, a former student of Malcolm Dees, and we can't be here at the same time because it's a typical Oxford problem, is that you feel like you're a kid in the candy store here. There's so many things happening, it's just very hard to choose what you're going to actually do. But that was a long-winded answer to getting to your question. The boom. I think what we talked about was that when you see one of Latin American successes, which was the massive impact it had on global literature, say from the 50s to the 80s, particularly 60s and 70s, is that you no longer notice it so much when it appears in other countries' literatures. The things that once were so unique to the region, like magical realism and nonlinear narratives, are now so part and parcel of the way we read. That we are, as readers, are actually living that Latin American oxygen every day, but we don't realize it anymore.
because it's become mainstreamed. And that's one of the, I think, the great cultural contributions of Latin America. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Eugene, if I can turn to you next, and in the context of this debate that we've been having about humanism, one of the sort of astounding statistics that we were presented with yesterday is that the AI computing capacity in the Middle East today, particularly in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, is about 10 times what it is in France at this moment. And so that's a part of the world that seems to be sort of, forging ahead in this context. Are there lessons from the cultural history of the region that will help, in some sense, mitigate the concerns that Joe raises and that the president has explored in the context of his book? And I'm sure the president wants to add.
Well, more than that, I have to say, and this is because I am a big fan of Eugene and also a big fan of Nairi. So I didn't know about the connection until later that they are married. But then I remember that two things impressed me. When I first met Nairi gave me all this beautiful story about sailing and what sailing means to her. So she's not only a great sailing expert, but she knows how to define in which direction to go. And somebody said, well, you have your meeting with Professor Eugene Rogan, and he's the husband of Nairi Woods. And I said, man, that must be a very hard conversation at home, so much intellectual intellect in a conversation. So I went to meet Professor Eugene Rogan, and I realized that I had written his book, The Arabs. So I was very much inspired. But before we got to the Arabs, we had a conversation that unites us more than any academic work, which is football. Eugene loves football, and that connected us a lot. And that day I realized how honored and how grateful I am with life to meet you both and consider you both friends. But that day, Eugene, you talked to me about a book that you were about to publish at that time that is now out for quite some time, which is about the Damascus killings. And we talked about violence, and we talked about the evolution of the Middle East. And there are things that many people don't know about my background, but I was a researcher and part of the Mavi Marmara inquiry panel at the UN in 2010, which I had to be pretty much in contact with people in the Gaza Strip. I have to talk with people from the IDF. And it was the first time that Israel accepted a UN panel to judge the conduct of IDF personnel. And in that research, in that analysis, in that inquiry, we said that unproportional force was used, that there had to be victim reparation. And Israel accepted the things that we said, but we also defended at that time the legality of the naval blockade, which was also controversial. But I remember that when we had that conversation, Eugene, you gave me a humanistic approach on how to understand that there is a possibility, a genuine possibility, to build a bridge that can connect the divide, that there is a possibility in constructivist international relation approach. And we talked about the importance of the Abraham Accords. So since you are an optimist about that connection between the East and the West, and especially in the Arab community with the rest of the world, I want you to reflect with us today why you gave me that humanistic, optimistic perspective that there are solutions to be explored, and if there is a willingness, those solutions can take place.
Well, President Duque, thank you for the vote of confidence and for the question. But I will say, as those who have said before me, that there's something slightly unnerving about welcoming a president into your office to have a conversation. And I was humbled by the experience, as I am by your friendship. means a great deal to Nairi and me, that you count us as friends, and we basked in that friendship. But the two things I take away from our conversations is one, your power of communication. And you really do bring a politician's skill of communication, even to this room. I mean, as I hear you speak to the values of humanistic intelligence as a response to our concerns about artificial varieties of intelligence, you're giving us, in a sense, an agenda or a charter statement to address the university's concerns of what our mission should be as it's now being redefined in the age of AI. We have to think about this. We cannot assume that the search for knowledge ends with us as a university, but that people are going to find their much quicker answers to be held or to be had by consulting AI. And I think in the humanistic intelligence, we are reminded that we still have things to teach people. We have knowledge to impart. People must come away from here knowing things. AI will help them find things out quickly, but they won't know it. We will help them know it. And I think in many ways, this is the charter statement you give us in your book, as you speak to people across the wide range of the university. Each one of them has such knowledge to impart. And the thing that struck me, my second observation about you, sir, is curiosity. You brought to your time in Oxford driving intellectual curiosity. You're not smug in what you know. You know a great deal. Your life experiences have taken you far beyond where my colleagues and I have been. But you bring humility to your time here, driven by curiosity. And I just found it in our conversations, talking to each other, the questions you were asking, the things that were driving you. You've done what all of us should do when you are confronted by the deep wealth. Oxford University is a well of knowledge. But we're all in little silos. I only work with the people who work on the Middle East. I never get a chance to go and Zoltan, we've never met. And what you have to tell me about neuroscience, I would love to learn. It takes someone like President Duque to harness the opportunity, the potential of a university, to speak to people in so many interesting domains that makes this such a great intellectual and research community. And you listen. And I guess that's where, coming back to what I do, where we connect. Because in a sense, I work on the Arab world with such baggage. I am an American. Do I have to say more? And I teach in an empire training university called Oxford. That's a lot of baggage to bring to the study of the Arab world. But if you wish to do so with integrity, you must listen. You must be modest and humble, sit down and listen. And so in order to write history, I have to listen to people from the region. I have to read their sources. And only then do I hope to have the integrity to be able to write about someone else's history. And I feel that in your conversations with us, that's what you brought to it too. And Karthik, for neglecting the disproportionate AI power of the UAE over France, forgive me.
We are, thank you, Eugene. We are about 4 minutes away from when I'm going to turn it over to Dean Woods to close this session. But I want to give the group that's gathered here a chance to ask questions. It's always useful to do. There are lots of questions in the audience. So maybe we'll take 2 or 3, and I'll give you the final word before we turn it over to Nairi. So we've got a hand here, Jolie. Oh, we've got a microphone coming. There we go. Yeah. And introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much, President Ivan. My name is Julio Alejandro. I'm one of the very few Latin Americans that have what is called exceptional talent visa here in the UK, talento excepcional, for my contribution specifically on blockchain and artificial intelligence. My question is about the timeline that you provide, because your definition that artificial intelligence does not currently can solve problems, or does not have the sufficient creativity. For us that work in artificial intelligence, it has already solved dozens of hundreds of problems, and it will just continue within a very quick pace. But probably you see another part from humans and humanistic perspective on how to bring these ideas, because as far as us that brings and creates the algorithms and the mathematics behind it, it's very clear that artificial intelligence has surpassed by orders of magnitudes the capacity of the human brain and the abilities of humans for solving pretty much anything. But perhaps you have another idea and another experience that you can share with us. Alejandro, muchas gracias.
And we'll take one more voice from the room before you can then respond collectively. And just want to make sure I'm not neglecting anyone. So maybe right there. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So I want to connect to you.
And please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Javier Cremades. I'm a Spaniard. I'm a jurist. And well, first of all, I want to connect you with your Professor Rogan about your points of integrity, humility. I have been very impressed, taking in account the mediocrity of the global leaders, to see this experiment today, where I discovered that you took initiative to invite a president just after his term to teach, and he also is rendering tribute to you today, expanding also your influence. So I saw how you create value for your students. By the way, congratulations to the Dean for these 15 years of leadership. And my question to you, President Duque, is how have you kept, what has been your tools, taking into account the power sometimes destroy people, sometimes exterminate human beings from inside, and seeing how your life has been evolving with your family and your intellectual activities and your curiosity, how has been your tools to remain human, being in such a powerful position? And the other question to you is what the rule of law means to you, because rule of law is not just a system of law, but it's a system, it's a relationship between the individuals and the public power, and these public powers can only be legitimate and exercised under the Constitution that needs to be anthropocentric, needs to be human, needs to be the human being in the center. So I want to both answers, what means the rule of law for you, and how can we see still a human being like you acting after such a tremendous time of leading a country like Colombia?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, Alejandro, let me begin with your question. I think there's I have maybe a little bit of a difference with the question, because I did not dismiss AI. I think AI has a very important power, and I am very respectful with the scientific, intellectual, and academic work that AI has in its structure. Last year, actually, our foundation in Colombia, in the first global conference, used AI as the topic, and it was called AI, Angel, or Demon. And on the angel side, it was very interesting to hear from people in medicine, for example, what AI is doing in terms of research, what it's doing in terms of accelerating the understanding of our cells, DNAs, in order to solve concrete and strategical problems in society. We also had a conversation on how, for example, AI is being used now in order to explore lost languages in the course of history, to understand the sequence of cultures in terms of written word, in terms of hieroglyphics, in terms of even connecting information that was lost over time, that appeared and didn't have an apparent connection. And this helps us improve our knowledge and understand humanity much better. So I praise that, but I also praise the contribution of AI in terms of providing access to knowledge to people around the world that didn't have that access. In fact, Karthik was mentioning that I started working on this topic, or talking about the connection of AI and HI before ChatGPT was launched, which was launched on the 30th of November 2022, before the game between Argentina and Poland in the World Cup in Qatar, and everybody wanted to see what was going on with Messi that day, but it was a revolution what started. So I am not dismissive, and the contrary, I'm respectful. But saying that, I believe that, yes, I think AI can process information maybe much faster than the human brain. Then yes, those who program AI can give patterns of analysis that will be faster and maybe more comprehensive and maybe with less risks or less failures than if we added many human brains. But there's one thing in which I really have a major difference, and it's that AI can work in the way it is programmed, in the boundaries that you can give. Even if you have an LLM with the capacity to continuously improve knowledge on the basis of the information it gathers, I don't think AI is going to be able on its own to really solve moral problems. It can even solve ethical ones, because sometimes ethics it's defined by the boundaries that we give. But I think that moral compass that we have as humans that allow us to make difference between good or bad, not on written information, but on circumstantial debates, it's something that is quite unique. And as Sultan said, it depends on how do you nurture the evolution, not only of your brain, but of your knowledge. And I think if we as humans allow AI to replace that capacity, we will be in a very difficult position. Instead, I believe that if we combine AI with HI, with humanistic intelligence, and we have the moral compass, and we have respect, and we try to bridge the divide, I think we can certainly use AI for good in a much better way. And I've shared this with some of my students in the academic world, and it is a hammer a tool or a weapon? It is defined by our moral decision. The object on itself does not define whether it's a tool or a weapon. So as humans, unless we are humanistically sensible, we will have very dark temptations of using AI as a weapon, and I think that will do a lot of harm. So if we provide more humanistic intelligence, we'll be more inclined to have the right regulation and the right boundaries to use it as the tool that technology can provide to society. So thank you so much for your question, Alejandro. And I think what Javier and I have been friends for quite some time, have great respect for him. He has published a new book about the rule of law. And I would say in Spanish sounds much better because it's imperio de la ley. Mm-hmm. It's the law as an empire, meaning an empire, what guides us. And I think the best contribution of the rule of law is that it's one of those few things that aims with quite success to make society an egalitarian place. We are the same under the rule of law, which means if someone has more resources than someone else, it's not the resources they have what will define how they behave in line of the law. If they break the law will be providing punishment in an equal way to anyone who commits the lawfulness. I think that has a very important value. And that's why I've always believed the rule of law is the essence also of democracy. And that's why when I run for the presidency, I said my 3 pillars are legalidad, the rule of law, emprendimiento, entrepreneurship, equals equality, which those 2 simple words will add to the objective of a more egalitarian society. So that's what I think about the rule of law. And how do I keep being human? I understood after my father passed away that he was a Stoic. But he never talked about Stoicism at home. Like he never said, son, Marcus Aurelius said this or that, or, son, we're going to talk about Diogenes. And no, but he allowed us to understand that in life, courage has a meaning. You have to stand for your beliefs. But he also made me understand temperance, which is it's my favorite word, I guess. And temperance has to do with auto-regulation, has to do with discipline, has to do with defining our behavior and defining how we react to circumstances. And I think what I learned in office, because there are a lot of people who discuss whether you're prepared for office or not. But I don't think anybody is really prepared to be president. You can be prepared to deal with circumstances that you may find in the presidency. But when you're in that seat, only until you're in that seat, you know what that seat looks like. And one of the things that I understood in office was the meaning of power. And the meaning of power in a presidentialist society, those who sit in the presidency have a very, very big amount of power to do good or to do evil. Why do I say that? Because if you're guided by hatred, you can destroy a company. You can destroy a person's life. You can destroy reputation. You can actually use the strings of power to put people to the edge. And that is dangerous. So the most beautiful lesson that made me reflect on that is that you are never going to take that road, even if you have that power. You're never going to be tempted to do wrong. And I have to say, I owe that to my background, but also from what I learned at home in my own family, is never use power for anything different than good. Even if you're receiving a tax, even if you have people who don't want to respect your work, your ideas, even if they have lawfulness behavior, only proceed against them through the rule of law. And I think that was a very important approach of dealing with power from a humanistic standpoint, and that's ethics. And the other thing is that when you're in power, you have to isolate your sentiments. Isolate your sentiments of being contaminated by anger, hatred, prejudice, whatever. Because you're a symbol of unity and you have to work for the whole nation. So I learned those things as putting humanism in the way we work in politics and in government. And I remember when I left office, and that brings me to Oxford, and I had this conversation here with Nairi and Karthik. I have a good friend that we were with him in your office in Madrid, Enrique Iglesias, the former president of the IDB, who just turned 94. He's a big fan of yours, by the way, Nairi. And Enrique, who's a mentor to me, said to me when I finished office, "What are you going to do next?" So I told him what I had planned. And he said, "Ivan, you're still young. And remember, to remain young, you need to have more projects than memories." And what happens with former presidents, and I know a lot, is that some of them are captured by memories. They stuck in the past. They always want to judge what's going on today and what's going to happen tomorrow and after tomorrow based on their time they were in office and how good they did, but how they were wrongly understood. So their life continues to be an explanation of the past, even if you want to work on the future. So for me, it was a page that I passed. One of the greatest moments in my life, if not the greatest, professionally speaking, because I was able to serve and to give the energy that I wanted to give. But I decided that my next step in life was going to be using also all my past experience, including the presidency, to try and create a more humanistic conscience from the nonprofit sector, from academia, but also in the defense of democracy. And I think that's what keeps me awake, full of energy, working on this beautiful project. And since I need to have more project than memories, working now on a new book that will be out in 2027 called Temperance, which will be a memoir of my time in office, but especially concentrated on governing in time of crisis. The pandemic, the migration crisis, the peace process implementation, the reconstruction after COVID, and a hurricane category 5, more than everybody can handle in just one term in office. So thank you so much for your question, and thank you so much, Javier and Arantxa, for being here with us.
Mr. President, I'm going to invite you to take the seat as we call on Dean Woods to give final remarks. Yes.
Just one small thing, Carthy. I just want to say something. I am blessed, Nairi, to meet you, to share so many good moments. I am honored that I enjoyed my TLF and that I'm now in the leadership circle, but also in your dean's circle, which is a great honor for me. And I just want to tell you on behalf of me and my whole family, thank you for being a mentor, for being a friend, and thank you for that permanent energy that you have, an eagerness in order to train, to nurture leaders that will serve in government with a humanistic perspective and an academic and technical rigor. Thank you so much, Nairi.